chair the webinar has begun.
Thank you. We call the meeting to order, and as part of that, I'd like to read a comment on hate speech. So recently, regional and local elected and appointed boards have been subjected to disruptive racist verbal attacks by anonymous callers during virtual public comments. The city of Mountain View is fully committed to racial, religious, and cultural equity and justice as we strive to create a welcoming, safe, and inclusive community for all. This advisory commission welcomes respectful and non-threatening public comments regarding matters over which the advisory commission has jurisdiction. Comments deemed otherwise pursuant to the council code of conduct and the government code may be grounds for immediately terminating a speaker's comment period. Thank you. Okay, our first item is consent and approval of the consent calendar.
We have number one is called.
Roll call.
Roll call, yeah.
Roll call. Thank you. Okay, let's go through roll call. Member Bonk.
I'm here.
Member Adamic.
Here.
Member Kuzma.
Present.
Member Stone.
Here.
All present. Thank you. Okay, so moving on then to public comments. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, now would be the time. Comments on Zoom?
No.
Comments in the room? Seeing none, proceed to the next item. So next item is the consent calendar. There's two items. The minutes and the safe routes to school. So any committee comments on items on the consent calendar?
First, we need to ask if anyone wants to pull one.
Okay. Is anyone wishing to pull an item from the consent calendar?
Yeah, the safe route to school reports for the purpose of providing some comments.
Okay, okay, we'll separate the two then. I'd like to go forward with approval of the minutes. Any comments or questions about the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Public comments on the minutes, excuse me. And Zoom?
Just trying to find Zoom.
No.
And seeing none in the room, is there a motion on approval of the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I can second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. We can go on to the safe routes to school item at this point. So looking for committee comments or questions on the safe routes to school items.
Yeah, so first, I think it's a very good report, and I really like the that we have a program like this. My comment is really on the fact that we have only a partial picture of the kids in Mountain View. There are about 1,200 kids in Mountain View who go to schools in the Los Altos school districts, most of them in Los Altos, and about half of them have to cross El Camino to go to school. Then the other thing missing in that view, if you will, is also Los Altos High School, which is a public, high school. There are about half the population there, so it's another 1,200 kids who are from Mountain View and go to Los Altos High School. The vast majority of them have to cross El Camino, and for some of them, they also have to cross Central Expressway and Caltrain to get to their school. I know that had been the approach with the Los Altos, a joint meeting or things like this, but I hope that in future we'll have a better, more holistic view of things, because it does impact everything. We'll be talking about the ATP and the networks. Right now, I don't see the schools, that 2,400 kids in Mountain View go to, and it's that's kind of a big miss. So that's very much my comment for me.
And just a point of order, Chair, we would like to have clarifying questions if there are any, and then public comment, which we expect first before committee comment, so that committee members, if they want to respond to the public comment, they can.
Let's step back for a minute then.
I'm not sure I can repeat it verbatim. So.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Okay, for clarifying comments on the Safe Routes to School report. Clarifying questions. Member Dominic?
Yes, so we had a written public comment asking about the omission of kind of engineering infrastructure progress. And I was just wondering why that was omitted from the report.
Thank you for the question, Priyoti Ahmed. I'm the program manager for Safe Routes to School. So this report primarily documents our funds that we have with VTA, which only goes to the education and encouragement piece and the evaluation piece. So that's why you see the education activities and the encouragement activities like Monster Bash, and then evaluation, which are the tallies. Engineering is a big part of our program, and we have multiple projects. Thank you for the email that I sent that Safe Routes to School is the seed kind of for those projects, such as Miramonte, the two-way bike track, as well as the complete street study, Rainstorm, complete street study, Middlefield. El Camino is happening. So there are projects that are started. It's just not documented in the report because this is kind of done through the grant, and we have to document what we have done with that grant.
Can I?
Additional
clarify one
clarifying
thing?
questions?
And my understanding is in prior years, we have done surveys associated with Los Altos High School.
Yes.
And so this year's the only reason for the omission that we didn't get responses back.
Yeah, so it's not an omission. So when I sent the tallies, I sent it to the Mountain View Wisman School District, as well as Los Altos and Mountain View High. And I didn't receive a response back from Los Altos
Okay.
School District, where the other Mountain View, the other school districts did.
The other schools, okay.
And we'll try again.
No,
We're
it's just-
developing that connection, so we'll try this year again, and
Yes.
hopefully we get it. But we did get it our first year.
Yeah, that was just checking that my understanding matched, that we weren't omitting Los Altos High School because of it being in Los Altos. It was because we just did not get responses.
Additional clarifying questions from the committee? Thank you. Comments on the Safe Routes to School report from the members of the public?
I wasn't sure if I should talk as well. I sent a letter, emailed the letter yesterday. So I wasn't sure if I should reiterate what I said in the letter, or yeah, okay.
You should, because
Welcome to-
Oh, this isn't- okay. Yeah, I'm not very experienced with
So you'll have-
meetings or yes.
3 minutes.
Okay, yep, okay. My name is Eleanor Hopkins, and I'm a pretty new resident here in Mountain View. I have 3 kids that attend, 2 of them are in elementary school, one's in middle school at Crittenden Middle School. And we bike as much as we can. However, I guess I want to also applaud the work that's been done with the Safe Routes to Schools that I've seen so far. We've been here for about a year. So, I'm still not up to speed on everything that's happening in the cycling community, but yeah, I saw a lot of excellent work around education, encouragement, equity evaluation, but my question was that engineering component that was missing. And to me, having safe infrastructure, which is the engineering, is really the most important component to having a safe route to school. As a parent, that's the one thing I think about is like, how safe is it to get my kids to school? And I know that was one of the barriers that was mentioned in the report too. The single most important barrier was, having the speed of cars and the safe route and safe proper intersections, parents don't want to send their kids to school if that infrastructure is not in place. And it's like a, if you build it, they will come thing. We can do all sorts of programs to try and encourage kids to ride, but if they're not gonna feel safe, it's not gonna happen. So that, and I understand that there's a financial component to that. That's, and a lot of working with other jurisdictions as well. So I know Mountain View doesn't have sole control over all the routes where kids are crossing. So I know that's tough, and it costs, 50 times the budget of what we're currently spending on safe routes to schools. But really, that's what needs to get focused on if we're going to actually make a difference in getting more people to ride. Because you can't really bike alongside cars that are going 50 miles an hour, and you can't cross an intersection where the intersections are promoting cars turning at 50 miles an hour. It's just not safe. So I definitely want to see that addressed in the future if possible. I don't know how, and I don't know who else needs to be involved with that. But from a parent perspective, that's really important. I don't know if anybody here, if I still have time, the Netherlands is an excellent example of being able to get infrastructure done. So I hope that everybody who's involved with any kind of bicycling and infrastructure and safe routes to schools takes a look at what's been done there. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comments in safe route to schools?
I'm not sure this is the appropriate time, but I do have some comments and I have a request. Is
Okay.
If they're on this item, you can
Yeah.
come to, turn it on away.
it's on this issue. It's on this issue. Yeah. I don't want to go into the details. I'm a father and a grandfather of kids who only ride bikes to their schools here in
Excuse
Mountain
me,
View.
sir.
It's that, yes.
Could you state your name? You don't have to
Good
state your
point.
address.
Sorry, my name is Dick Roy. Okay, Dr. Richard Roy. My PhD is in wireless telecommunications, and I'm here to tell you that 10 years ago, we had in place a system that you could put on one of these, we did it, that would save the lives of pedestrians and bicyclists. The FCC just recently made a decision which mollified all of that. They torpedoed it. What I'm asking is there anybody here who's interested in helping me turn that around so that we can program these devices and lower cost devices that go in children's backpack and on your bicycle to save their lives? I appreciate the infrastructure need, and there is an infrastructure component to the system as well. It's a very complex system. We've been developing it over the last 25 years. And the FCC, at the behest and the request of a single US corporation, torpedoed the whole thing last month. Is there anybody interested in helping me? And you all know about these things. And if you haven't seen, these are on, Facebook. This is the Grant Road and Levin incident that happened, and you're all familiar with that. And that's Andre's memorial at the corner of Grant and Altamira that I drive by every day. Yeah, and that has my contact info on it, so I'll leave that with you. So if you're at all interested in either learning about the system, learning more about it, or more importantly, gathering enough momentum amongst committees like yours throughout the Bay Area, throughout the United States, because there today is no proponent of this component of the disastrous sector that is accidents in this country. 50,000 people lose their lives every year. 10,000 of them are pedestrians and bicyclists. The impact on the US economy is predicted by the US DOT to be almost $1 trillion annually. Tell that to Elon Musk. 1 trillion. That's 3 billion a day. That pays for a lot of infrastructure. It does. Think about how safe you would make the system with that kind of investment. So if you have any questions, my contact info is there. Please feel free to contact me. I've been working on, like I say, for 25 years, and the last 10 have been very depressing. very depressing. We were this close. And if we had won today, you would be riding around with something in this phone while you're on your bike, and there would be people that knew you were there and wouldn't run you over. Andre,
Thank you.
would be alive today.
Thank you. Additional public comments on the Safe Routes to School report. Okay, seeing none, we will go to committee comments.
I think I've shared mine
Thank you.
out of order, but.
Additional committee comments? Member Dominic?
Yes, I really appreciated the report and actually all the work and energy that's gone into it. It's really seems to have a lot of good momentum. And so I'm grateful for that. Maybe a bit tangential, but I think a component of kids biking to school is making sure that their bikes don't get stolen. Anecdotally, kids start biking and then their bike is stolen and then something happens and they don't bike anymore. And I think there's components, I don't know if you're already like talking about how to properly store bikes and lock them, etc., but also talking to schools about having good bike racks, etc. Thanks.
Stone?
I guess I would like to say thanks for the public comment from the members of the public. I would like to say, I believe when it comes to the engineering component of Safe Routes to School, we can advise the public to look at our Vision Zero local road safety plan. Is that correct?
For Safe Routes to School.
For when the VTA funding is for the education and stuff that we receive in the port, but we are doing engineering stuff.
Yes.
I'm saying a good place to look for that would be the Vision Zero local road safety plan, the active transportation plan we're talking about today, to learn more about our engineering infrastructure investments.
Yeah.
In,
And the capital projects website lists some projects as well.
yes. So, that's all.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and make one comment. I was very pleased with the report. I especially like the increase in mode share among active transportation. I guess I'd like to see it complemented at some point with other bicycle and pedestrian counts, which obviously don't distinguish just students, but the infrastructure, the destination facilities, as well as the culture and education all contribute to the virtuous cycle of more riders means more safety, means more riders. So thank you again for that report. Okay, seeing no additional comments, is there a motion to accept the report?
Can make a motion to accept the Safe Routes to School memo.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that completes item 4 on the consent calendar. Moving on to unfinished business. I don't believe we have any unfinished business that was carried over, which puts us at item 6, new business. The active transportation plan, scoring criteria, and holistic network maps. So I believe we have received a memo and a staff presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. Brandon White, Transportation Planner here with the City of Mountain View, and here to talk with you all about the active transportation plan. Holistic network and scoring criteria. So let's start with the beginning in mind or the end in mind. So we have a recommendation for this item, which is to recommend to the Council Transportation Committee for staff to proceed with the development of the active transportation plan, including maps and criteria, scoring criteria as presented. Take a quick look at our agenda for this presentation. We're going to talk briefly about the background. We'll talk about the holistic network maps, talk about the scoring criteria, and then the next steps in the active transportation plan as a whole. First with the background. Here we have the vision statement, and the vision statement reads, Mountain View leads the region with an active transportation plan that defines a series of connected, low-stress, green corridors that invite active transportation. Corridors include shade, wildlife habitat, and public open spaces. The plan enables the city to intentionally support culture of walking and biking, enhance biodiversity, and reduce climate change impacts. Now, this vision statement has been reviewed and approved by the council and is slightly shorter than what has last come to the BPAC. So let me take a moment here to let you know where we were, where we are, and where we are going with the active transportation plan. As you know, we have completed the existing conditions report and presented that to the BPAC. I just mentioned the vision statement, which is now approved. We are underway with policy development, although that is not the topic of today's conversation. Today's conversation will be talking about the holistic network with modal priorities and the guiding principles and scoring criteria of the plan. From there, we'll develop our prioritized project list. And then finally, of course, a draft and final plan. And along this process, we'll have community and committees such as the BPAC engagement. Existing conditions analysis. Our technical advisory committee, the TAC, our active transportation plan advisory committee, the APAC, and the BPAC have reviewed the draft existing conditions analysis, and here are a few maps from that process. Part of that process had an engagement. We focused heavily on engagement, and we had 655 active transportation plan survey responses. We had 2 bicycle tours, 3 walking tours. And then in order to have a demographic response equal to that of the city or closer to that of the city, we wanted to focus more, and we had community engagement events at where people are, at community services agency, day worker center, senior center, teen center, and also with the Cafecito group. Ask MV data during the plan process and before the plan process has also been considered in this engagement and in the existing conditions analysis. And as I mentioned before, the TAC, the BPAC, and the APAC provided feedback. Here briefly, we have a look at the community input for challenge link spots, walking, bicycling, and rolling. And so this is how all of that information was aggregated geographically. Similarly, how it was aggregated, but not from a point perspective, but from a line perspective for our streets. Now let us take a quick look at the potential holistic network. First, map development process. We wanted a complete pedestrian network to support our culture of walking. That meant walkable sidewalks on all public improved streets, trails, street trees, and landscape corridors to provide shade, stormwater, and biodiversity benefits. We considered all those things and the community input that we talked about when presenting the maps that I'm about to show. Similarly, for bicycles, we wanted a low-stress connected bicycle network with a core spine of low-stress facilities, one that reflected the VTA's bicycle superhighway corridors, and provided trails and public open space, enhanced facilities for Safe Routes to School. And then, as I mentioned before, reflected community. Now let's talk about the maps. So here I will present the keys to the maps and then be open to any comments you might have. I'm not gonna walk through every single link or point on this map. Holistic pedestrian network map, we'll start with that. And we can see in the dashed, small, fine dashed red, our sidewalk gaps. The blue, which is kind of everywhere on the map, is the existing sidewalk. So we have a 96% of our roadways have sidewalk. Existing trails are the dark green. Potential trails are the larger dark orange or orange color. And these are trails that are being considered in our process. Consider them potential, not proposed, not planned, but potential at this stage in the process. And then trails that are in a dashed green, those have been approved by council via a precise plan process. And then finally, the unimproved streets are on this map. And unimproved streets, you can see here, some of them have blue sidewalk and some of them have dashed red, indicating they do not have sidewalk. Those are not part of the ATP planning process. Those will be dealt with, those will be addressed potentially through another process. It is likely that the ATP makes a suggestion to consider the unimproved streets policy, but that unimproved streets policy is not part of the ATP scope. Next, for the holistic bicycle network map, we have two basic colors. We have off-street, which are trails or paseos that are existing, dark green, solid. And then we have dashed, which are potential. We are only showing potential trails or potential paseos if they're in a precise plan. And then we are showing some potential trails for consideration on this map. From an on-street perspective, that is the purple color. Solid is existing and dashed is something that we are bringing forth for potential plan approval for consideration. This is all in an effort to show a holistic network map for both bicycles and pedestrians that is connected, that does the things and supports the vision statement. And then lastly, the bicycle superhighway, as mentioned before, and the bicycle superhighway is shown where it is not inside of Mountain View, with one exception, because we have done the things on the bicycle superhighway in Mountain View. The one exception is funded for design and under active design right now, and that's this section here, which is being listed as potential. I'll go back to the slides. Now let's briefly talk about scoring criteria. Scoring criteria overview. So we provided a detailed list of the scoring criteria for safety, comfort, access and equity, mobility and connectivity, sustainability and biodiversity in the memo. Here's a summary of the scores as they were presented to the BPAC in the past. The council and the Council Transportation Committee has asked us to include feasibility and implementation as a scoring criteria. In order to do that, we downshifted the existing scores 10%. And you can see here, those are the new scores for those categories in order to make room as instructed for feasibility and implementation. Let's look now at feasibility and implementation and the proposed scoring criteria. Initially, we'll consider order of magnitude costs with from a high level. So does it cost more than $10 million? Is it between $2 and $10 million? Or is it less than $2 million in such a situation, receiving the max score of 2 points? Interagency coordination, the more agencies to coordinate with, generally the slower the project, hence implementation. So the less agencies involved, the higher the score. Practical implementation timeline, long, medium, short. Oops. Opportunity to leverage an existing planned project. So if we have a project already going on, is it possible to bring in that project along with it and therefore improving its feasibility and its implementation? So 2 points if it's able to do that. And then finally, does the project align with a local, regional, and or federal funding source? So if the project is available for grants, that could make the project a bit easier to implement. And briefly talk about our next steps. Next steps, looking forward to Q2 of this year. Network map scoring criteria to the City Transportation Committee, or CTC. The Q3, project prioritization and public outreach. And then next year, a draft plan. And that would bring us up to the proposed schedule after we had come back with the need to increase the to provide space for feasibility and implementation. So our staff recommendation today is to recommend to the Council Transportation Committee for staff to proceed with the development of the active transportation plan, including maps and scoring criteria as presented. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Clarifying questions from the committee. So,
I have some questions about the existing trails as presented on the map. Mine a little bit. So the connection between Castro City and the new development, Leland to Town Circle. Last time I was there, there was a lot to do. Get there, get across. Is that situation changed or is it still the same?
Unfortunately, that situation is the same. So, and this was, there was a permit provided to the property owner to actually install the gate. So there's kind of a long backstory on that.
Yes, okay, but do we anticipate that situation to change? Because it's included as an existing connection in the map. So
it should be,
Oh, it's shown as an
I
existing.
think it should be potential.
I am not as familiar with the location as you.
Can you go back to that? So maybe that was an area in the map then.
Oh, yes, on the other side of Rankstorff Park, right next to the train tracks. That's the green line.
Yeah.
That's the connection.
Okay.
That would be really nice to exist, but
So my clarifying question to add on to that. I know there are SAOs that didn't get implemented or the correct easements were not obtained in the development that may have happened in the last 15, 20 years. Perhaps like this one.
Yes.
Can we show those as potential? Since it may be 30, 40 years before they come up for development again, but
So this is, Paseos are part of the process that we plan for the network. And what that would be is the crossing. So we would like to have a network where the block length is like 500 feet based on the Caltrans's Design Information Bulletin number 94. Maybe it's a little longer than that, but you know, that's where we're basing it from. So we have analyzed the network based on that, and from those locations, then going out and kind of having kind of a blurry line of this is the kind of rough area we might like a Paseo. If that development is redeveloped. So we do need to have the lines, kind of blurry lines on the page in order to request that during the entitlement process. And so that will be part of this process as well.
Okay, so the one we just spoke about might reappear as a potential if it.
It's unlikely because it's unlikely to redevelop.
Allison Boyer, Assistant Public Works Director. Sales are a little tricky, as I'm sure you know. So I think as we further develop this, we'll look at that, but it'll probably be something that you'll also see in the policy section because it is something that would have to get recommended by council for us to implement in a private development, not on city property. So it's something that you'll see a little bit more in that section, but it's something that we are exploring as we're going through this. It's just a little bit harder to score something. It's not a definite. And as we're identifying projects, we're trying to make sure that we're scoring the ones that we know we have a little bit more say in what happens on.
I guess my question is, how do we maintain the list of maybe a long-term requests so we don't, if the opportunity comes up and like, even if this property may be developed quicker than we anticipate, we don't forget that, oh yeah, this is a Paseo potential.
Yeah, we can continue to look at that as we further develop the ATP and the maps.
Because, yeah, I know we missed some others that, again, 500 feet, and if it comes up, we shouldn't forget.
There's one more that maybe it exists, but I wasn't able to find, just north of that one in the Montaloma neighborhood. It connects two cul-de-sacs. I was not able to find it, but I may not be, yeah, right there, that little connection.
Oh, that's.
That should be,
Okay,
I've used that, I think.
okay.
Is
it's
that
tricky
the Waldorf's one?
because it's pedestrian only.
Now that's the school. So I've come to that.
This is the one where there's a
Okay,
different level. You have to kind of like go upstairs and there's
Yeah.
like a church.
Yeah.
Garden area and they allow pedestrians
no,
to walk through.
that's not
It's
there.
going in the wrong direction.
Sorry, then I'm referring to a different.
We need to check what that one is.
So that connects Heather Court and Lauren Lane. So the one you're talking about that goes to Waldorf School, I have come to that. It's got a chain and stairs, so you definitely can't bike there, but you
Yeah.
can walk. Oh, this is just next to that, or at least according to the map. So maybe it's placed wrong on the map.
It's-
Oh, you're
it's
talking about
placed
between,
wrong on the map.
between Heather and Laura Lane is the one where it looks like it's placed on the map, but the actual
Okay,
connection is Fay Way to Lita Drive.
okay,
We will
so
make
that's
the
just
note.
a-
It is that is a typo.
Okay, so,
That is a
okay,
typo.
that's my clarifying question.
It's a big city.
Any additional clarifying questions?
Sure, so since we're on the map and I'm jumping ahead, there is something that looks like a trail, I guess, by Manila Drive. So that's pretty much by Moffett Field.
Mhm.
That thing there. I've commuted that route, like for 3 or 4 years back when I was working, and I really don't know what trail that is.
There is a side path along Manila Drive there between the, I could show you if you really want me to, but there is a side path there.
Not in outstanding condition, but it is there.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, it's that good, large sidewalk, is it?
Yeah.
It meets bicycle,
Pardon me?
it meets bicycle standards
In terms
of
of the
the
width.
time it was built.
Yeah, it looks like a large sidewalk.
I never biked on it because it's too uneven. And I used what, resembles a plane bear. So, okay, so that answers that. So, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. I just wanted to jump on this one because the map was there, but I can go back to my, oh, okay, no, I continue then. So I had a follow-up question on the unimproved street policy. So thanks for providing the policy and the information on why it's not part of the ATP. But reading the policy itself, it looks like the city kind of had a trade-off in a way where it allowed, this unimproved street to remain unimproved with some leniency so that homeowners there could keep the rural character by not having sidewalks, among other things. But the trade-off is that, from what I've read, is that they are kind of excluded from the repavement program in a way. So there is definitely language there that says that, the only thing they're going to do is to patch some potholes, put some sealers, but not something that would be a repavement and so on. So my question is that, is it my a proper understanding of the policy, and if so, does adding bike lanes is considered as repavement? Because I know that we do, things like this. So I'm trying to assess what's doable on this on improved streets, given the, and having potholes, I would argue, is part of a rural
I think-
character, but that's
I
that's
think
another
all
story.
of this, these are good questions, and I think all of this would need to happen in a review of the unimproved streets policy.
Yeah, but I'm looking at short answers to see what's possible, because I believe you show a potential bike lane on Sleeper, for instance, and I'm not sure if it's, it could not be part of repavement program because there's no repavement, so I'm not sure, and is it considered an improvement of the street? So these are like practical.
The city has made voluntary city improvements in the past on these streets, so it does not prohibit, certainly does not require the city to do that, but we can consider these streets for potential improvements. The unimproved streets policy doesn't prohibit us from considering them or even doing them. But if you are asking for technical questions about the unimproved streets policy, or if you're looking to make comments, we can listen to your comments, but it is not part of the active transportation plan.
Okay, I mean, it seems to me that that's something that has to be resolved to even consider a bike lane there, but it's.
So restriping does not require repaving. So doesn't mean it's gonna score the highest as we go through this criteria, but this is to show all possible areas that we will be evaluating. But yes, that area is not currently envisioned as part of the paving program. Paving program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one additional question is, what is the city liability not having sidewalks in some places? So I know that can be litigious, so people can sue, if they get, if you get hit. I mean, typically insurance get involved
It's
and
not-
and
We
things
can
like
look into
this.
that some more, but it's not something
Because
that's.
that-
It's not a requirement to have sidewalks in the city. We are required to have equal accommodation, but it is not a requirement to have sidewalks.
So, I mean, reading in the policy, this is part of the standard streets has sidewalks. So I would argue that de facto that's a requirement, right? So
Can you say that last part again?
in reading the policy for an improved street, they
Mhm.
describe what a standard street or an improved street is, and it has sidewalks. So,
So they're excluded from that as part of that agreement.
okay.
But there's no law or guideline out there that states you have to have sidewalks. So we are not in violation of anything.
So somebody gets injured there, do they sue the city or do they sue the homeowners who didn't
That is
provide
not a
that?
question that I'm going to answer without a law degree, but we
No,
can, we
no, because I mean, these are,
we can have those
important things, 'cause
conversations
these
with
are.
our city attorney as we go through all this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bernard?
I was wondering when we'll have some policy language for the ATP that we can give feedback on?
On our tentative agenda list, we have the next time we're bringing the active transportation plan to the BPAC is in June. It is tentative, but as we've told you many times, I'm not upset or anything, but as we've told you, we're working on policy. We've worked on policy language, we're actively working on policy language, and we have policy language to work on in the future. So it is definitely underway, and it is something BPAC will review.
Okay. And then previously I had asked for at least some sample projects to be scored, which was declined. And so I'm wondering when the projects are all scored and we see what this scoring criteria actually does, is it then too late in the ATP process to go back and revise scoring criteria? Because now we finally see how it works, but maybe it didn't quite work. So will we have any recourse?
It would be too late in the process to revise the scoring criteria. We would need
We
to,
have to basically do it blind.
That is not what I'm saying.
Okay,
It is entirely possible for the BPAC to make the statement that they think this project should be higher on the list than another project. But we cannot go back on the schedule to revise the scoring criteria and get the project done on time.
Alison Boyer, again, the intention is that then you are not artificially choosing your projects. If we're coming up with the scoring criteria ahead of time, then you're not biased in what projects are filtering out in certain ways. That doesn't mean that we can't say this project is not ranking as high as we'd like. BPAC would like to recommend that this project be moved above the line or whatever, but it doesn't mean we can't make different recommendations. We just don't want to skew the scoring because we want project A to rate above project B.
yeah, okay. I'm just saying that's not what I'm asking for. I mean, maybe I have some preferences on projects. I just feel that I cannot evaluate scoring criteria without seeing them in action. Like maybe staff and maybe other BPAC members can imagine, but anyway, so it's not, sorry. So it's more about how we can actually evaluate the scoring criteria without seeing how things score, even like a couple of example projects.
I think on that.
Okay. I guess, okay, just in the extreme example, like which scoring criteria do you think might differentiate, like in the pedestrian network? There are a bunch of cul-de-sacs that don't have sidewalks. And then there's things like the crossings over 85 on Dana and Middlefield. Which of the scoring criteria do you think will differentiate a cul-de-sac from those across barrier connections for missing sidewalks?
That's a very specific question. My understanding of the scoring criteria is that they would be treated equally. The sidewalk is missing.
Well, but there's
They're
safety.
earning points.
So there's safety and comfort. If there are collisions in a certain place, there's less likely to be collisions in, especially, you know, fatal collisions in a cul-de-sac. So for example, if something's on the high injury network, I would expect that to get more points on the safety, the safety criteria.
Are you asking if all things being equal, you had one location without sidewalk and one location with sidewalk on a cul-de-sac, should they be treated different?
No, I'm just saying like they're missing sidewalks in two different locations. I'm just wanting to see how the scoring criteria would differentiate a cul-de-sac from like a major cross barrier connection, just to get a sense of whether this will work.
So I'm just gonna go through the scoring
Yeah.
criteria. So access and equity supports lower income residents, so it would depend on where it's located. So if it's the cul-de-sac in one of our different areas, 0 to 14 points. So a cul-de-sac in one of those areas, that's gonna give it a lot of points. So that's gonna start making it up here, whereas over 85, you're not really going to have that same, maybe, but fill in gaps on existing, they'll probably rank about the same because we said there's a gap between them. And all ages and all abilities by working district. Again, just kind of depends on the location. Supports school children, probably the cul-de-sac is going to support the kids walking to school because they're gonna walk through the neighborhood to get to school. I don't think they're typically.
So I should probably score
No,
lower in the
cul-de-sac.
examples than predominant
What-
spacing, because one of them is right next to a school.
I
Okay.
think, yeah,
I mean, so
and this
some of
is-
it, all of it is so very location.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. It's too hypothetical.
And then I will say, one of the things that 85 or 101 will have ranking against it in this latest feasibility is you're going to have to work with Caltrans. You're going to have to work with other jurisdictions, and that's going to bring that feasibility and implementation score lower.
It's very difficult for us to score hypotheticals
Yeah.
because there's many
Yes, which is
categories.
why we need examples. I just heard, I mean, I think any sane
Could we save
person
that
would
for the
be
comment
like,
period?
sorry.
This is outside of.
Clarifying questions.
Okay, sorry, but thanks, that was very helpful. And then Yeah, that's all my questions for now.
Kuzma or?
Yeah, sure. First off, I think this was looked correct in the presentation, but in the staff report as a public commenter noted, the safety and comfort total is marked as 35 points, not 32. I assume that is a typo.
Those type of,
Okay. I asked in the feedback clarifying questions about alleyways. Those do not appear on the sidewalk gaps. They don't have sidewalks. I'm not right now asking for them to have sidewalks, but how do those sorts of alleyways show up in these sorts of analyses? Because I would normally expect all the public right of ways show up.
yeah, so this analysis in a lot of ways is cutting edge. We used AI to evaluate quickly across the city because this was going to happen at a different phase with a lot more time. So we needed to speed the process up. And so alleyways were not included in the analysis. And you're welcome to make comment if you have an opinion on that, but they were not included in the analysis. So literally, we didn't direct the AI to evaluate the alleyways. It treated the alleyways more like a parking lot.
Okay, so then if we were thinking about other rights of way that might not show up in this sort of analysis, I guess, yeah, city-owned parking lots to that point would not show up. Does
Yes.
anything, is there anything else that I realize it's hard to ask for what we aren't thinking of, but is there anything else
Yeah.
we're not thinking of that might not be showing up obviously in this that we might normally consider an access point or
We
Through
purposely eliminated private streets, I think, for obvious reasons.
Okay.
So then other than that, no, but if you ask me that about alleyways, I just didn't think about it. So,
okay. I guess in some respects, some schools and parks don't show up in certain ways, but they do in others. Okay.
Schools are not city-owned right of ways.
Yeah, yes, fair enough. But they're not private either. For the updates that are currently tentatively scheduled for 2, by policy, that would. What categories of things is that expected to include? And that may be too exhaustive a list to list now. I'm just trying to get a rough idea of what we're going to be hearing about then.
I think we have to, as a staff, everything we bring to you has to come through the technical advisory committee
Okay.
and the active transportation plan advisory
Okay.
committee. Those are things that have to be evaluated prior to me being able to answer that question. Otherwise, I'd be taking their ability to provide input away. So we have a long list of things internally, but that doesn't mean everything internally is coming.
Okay, the expectation, I guess then I should ask. The expectation is, sorry. Is there going to be another category of, I'll wait until that meeting to figure, or until we see the agenda for that meeting, I guess. Never mind. I'll leave my questions there. I think everything else goes in comments.
Any additional questions? Member Dominic?
I was wondering how the 10 points for feasibility was decided versus a different amount.
We were not given guidance on a percentage to provide, and so we, as a staff, talked about it and felt that 10% to represent what the input council was giving represented what council had said, but they didn't specifically say take a specific number, so we did our best evaluation of their input.
Monday?
Sure. So I have two more clarifying questions. So the first one is on the pedestrian holistic map. If I were to look at a network of pedestrians, so I walked, here from my home using the pedestrian network. So that was mostly sidewalks, but I had to cross 7 streets to get here. And so so when I view a network, I think the connections between the sidewalk is very important, and I don't see it represented. And my question is, was it because it's too complicated or things like this, because I just want to know why it's not present there, because
It seems like,
it seems to be the most important one, so.
Yes, we will evaluate the crossings as the projects come up, to show you a map of all of the crossings. You wouldn't be able to read it.
No,
We tried, I'm gonna be completely honest, we tried, and it's hard to develop a cross, where all of the crosses are gonna go. But as we develop the projects identification, and when this goes from a more planning level to a design level, all of those areas will be included for crossings.
Right, so my understanding is that the scoring criteria will be based on how well a pedestrian project connects to the network. So will the network include the crossings and because to me, I mean, it's more common, but it's much more important to prove the crossings than the sidewalks. I mean, they are what they are. I mean, they could use improvements, but that's the most stressful part of any walking journey.
Crossings will be
I
considered.
won't blame all my gray hair to this, but some of them came from that. So
As part of the project evaluation.
okay, so
Question on
the
that.
map is not really necessarily the map that the thing will be scored on.
It would, correct. This is showing you where we are evaluating projects based on what is missing in our network.
Okay. Yep.
So crossings includes only painted crossings or?
no, everything. It could also include
Signalized.
signalized, it
Well,
could also include
RFPs,
under crossings
Pedestrian hybrid beacons.
or bridges.
Okay, or I guess implied crossings where there's only a ramp and no paint?
Yep, that's a legal crosswalk.
Yes, okay. It'll include all the range.
And I had one more question, but that's more about the scoring criteria. So I think for the feasibility implementation, there is something about the project length, like short, long, or things like this. What is short for a project? What is long, and is it also what we think it's going to be, or versus what it is? Because we have projects that unfortunately drag for a long time.
Depends. So we're in a slightly different revenue situation than we were a few years ago. And so we're doing fewer projects per year. And so that's why I think we're saying short, medium and long rather than, 3 years, 7 years and more than 7 years or something. When the finances are a bit more tight, it takes a little longer because you have to kind of spread them out.
But when we're going to use it as a scoring criteria, so the rank has to be determined at the time you score, right? So I mean, that's,
Staff
to decide
evaluation
if it's,
is qualitative to some extent. It is qualitative to some extent, based off of what transportation manager Love was saying. It is qualitative, not necessarily quantitative.
okay. I don't know. Some comments.
Additional questions? Sean?
Serge's question. You mentioned the standard width of bike paths in response to his, what is that width?
The minimum width is 10 feet now. That's minimum. Preferred is
trail.
11. And then in high use areas, these guidelines are designed for communities that have a bicycle mode share of 1%. We have a very high bicycle mode share, 17th in the nation, last I checked. So in those situations, the 12 is the preferred minimum rather than the 11.
But some of these are narrower, but they're still included because that was the standard at the time
Yes,
that
sir.
they were in.
That's the minimum.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Do we know what the standard, what that lower standard was?
8.
8. Okay, thank you.
Cousin?
Yeah, I know the answer to this question, but I want to clarify it for members of the public. This map, when it includes facilities that are like the already existing, that does not mean we will not be improving those facilities as part of this plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, additional questions? I think I have one on the additional feasibility criteria when it said the dollar range, 2 million or whatever. Is that cost to the city or total project cost?
The project cost.
Okay, so something like El Camino,
Mhm.
which had a very large cost, even though it was mostly non-city money, would get ranked low. Thank you. Okay, seeing no further clarifying questions from the committee, we're going to comments from members of the public.
Hi, Lucas Mello. I just wanted to really appreciate all of the work that you guys have done for this. And plus one, the conversation on the paseos. The locked paseos are very frustrating because it's really valuable for the connectivity of the community. And any work that the city can do to collaborate with these private landowners would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Additional public comments in the room? Going to Zoom?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, coming up. Thank you.
Couple comments, and I'm sorry I didn't come prepared enough. I hadn't read the report or anything. Along the lines of what someone was asking here about alleys and stuff. When I want to go to a real like full-size grocery store from like Wagon Wheel and area, there you walk along and you go past this thing of Hetch Hetchy that's blocked off, and that would cut you off by like a quarter of a mile walking or biking or whatever. And so I don't know if like maybe that's private, maybe that's something that you can't actually access, but it would take you directly from, that corner of Moffett to Bailey Park. Also on, what you were saying there about scoring criteria struck a little bit of a note with me, because one thing that you find, like when we're evaluating grants and stuff, is that you set up some scoring criteria and suddenly, you score them all. You find that all of a sudden it's all based on say, the seniority of the PI, because everything else is at ceiling or something, because you have now these distance criteria or the cost criteria, and maybe everything's $1 million. So it doesn't really do you any, that isn't doing anything. So when you actually do it, you discover that there's weird things. And in fact, the cost thing bothered me a little bit, because if you have some long project that's actually providing a lot of connectivity, it's going to cost more. And so it's going to rank lower. Whereas for me, often a longer project seems more useful. So maybe a cost per mile or something criteria would be better there. So.
Thank you. Additional comments in the room from members of the public? Checking on Zoom.
Yes, we have at least one speaker at this point. Tom Harrington, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Tom Harrington from Intuit. Very quick comment. When I looked at the bike trails that were depicted, there's a section, if I understood it correctly, that goes between San Antonio Road and along Bayshore Parkway, which eventually becomes Salado, that is listed as an existing on-street bike trail. I'd like to request folks take a look at that and see if that really is a bike trail. I travel it daily. I'm going to tell you it's not. We've been in discussions with our neighbors trying to see if there's something that we could actually do to connect San Antonio with actually Garcia and on beyond along Salado that goes through. The other comment just to keep in mind, and I'll keep this short, is when you look at the equity piece of what you're solving for, my question to the team is whether or not you're considering equity from those from other areas, for instance, those using the superhighway, the bike superhighway. I could actually see there being a real opportunity for folks that live outside of Mountain View but work in Mountain View that would be taking the bike superhighway in. That's all I have. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any further hands up.
Okay, seeing no further public comment, moving on to committee comments. Member Dominic, and Deputy your comment.
I can start, yes, because I already started saying the comment. I am really concerned about the untested scoring criteria. And I have to say, what I've asked for before is not necessarily, if you think that I or anyone else would be biased towards some projects, I said, why don't we score a couple of projects that have already been implemented? Just to see how this works. I think what I would like to do is transcribe the feedback I got about the cul-de-sac versus like an actual important connector. And that I felt like we did not know collectively that the scoring criteria would have picked the more important project than a cul-de-sac with, you know, a few houses that maybe 2 kids use. If we don't know which project the scoring criteria would prioritize, I think we're going in blind. And I think we must score some projects. It doesn't have to be current projects, but something just to see how they work. I don't know how we can say this is what we want to do. And like the member of the public mentioned, there could be things that pop up that we realize after the fact. Oh, wow, we're downgrading the projects, like maybe California Street would score poorly because it's expensive, but it covers so many blocks. Oh no, we should have used the per impact cost or something like that, but it will be too late. And I'm just kind of seeing, maybe it won't be a train wreck at all, but maybe it will be a train wreck. And I fail to understand why we can't just see the scoring in action before we have to vote on it. I just don't see it. I'm also concerned about I don't see overall in the plan something that will evaluate and keep track of progress overall. I think we can make very good plans and we might even have the perfect set of scoring criteria. I don't know. But we might not implement it. And there isn't something in the plan that would try and be a working way of figuring out how we can make good progress on the plan. So I don't know, Brandon, could you bring up the slides that I wanted to share? So we have such a thing that I don't know whether it will make it into the active transportation plan, but I really hope that it does. And actually, I was even a little bit afraid to mention it because I'm afraid that even mentioning it might make it disappear because it's like too useful. So sorry, I'll wait for it.
What slide are you looking for?
The ones I sent you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know what you're referring to. Yeah. I'm sorry. Let me bring that up. Here they are. I thought you meant my slides.
No, so it's still live, or it was earlier today, and it's the active transportation dashboard. And it has, if you go to full screen, maybe we can see the bottom of it as well.
Hey, someone wants to show me how to go to full screen on this.
The slideshow in the upper right of the screen.
Thank you.
You just click the big slideshow button.
Okay.
So it has, like, if you see the bar charts on the bottom, it has the existing bikeways, it has the funded bikeways, it has the planned bikeways. And, you know, it could incorporate all sorts of other data like, you know, level of traffic stress and near misses and collisions. Like, this would be a way to have a living tracking document of what's going on. And I want to point out, I mean, maybe I'm mistaken, but this map, I think this is the bike one, does not look that different from the old, all new like bike network, right? I think most of the things overlap. We already have had, you know, a lot to do, and probably a lot of it was pretty well thought out. So I'm really hoping that we can keep this dashboard as part of the plan and use it as a way of tracking progress. And then I have the following slides we could just go through quickly. This was from a presentation, I mean, not the annotation, but like 2 years ago of like things that were expected to happen in the past 2 years. And because we don't actually have a spreadsheet of projects, these were just my best guesses. Next, we can just kind of go through something next. You know, some things were completed, some things were started, but not as much maybe as one had hoped. And we heard about the new funding situation, but I think also it would be important to have some retrospection. At the beginning of this process, I asked if we were going to evaluate why things from the prior plan had not been implemented, and that was out of scope. I think it shouldn't continue to be out of scope. I think we should evaluate why things are not being done, whether it's staffing or lack of funding, or, you know, maybe we didn't prioritize well enough, or maybe we just didn't build and we prioritized just fine. So next. Uh-oh, are we going backwards? Is it really, were there so many things?
I think there's just a lot of things.
Now we're
Okay.
going back.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I think it would be really important to like not just keep looking forward and things we want, but also like think of, are we implementing the things that we planned? So thanks, that's the end for the slides. And then just for the maps, just I think it would be useful to label Permanente Creek like Hetch Hetchy Trail, just because it's like, oh, why is there a trail like all of a sudden there? I think that would be good. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Additional committee comments? Stone?
Yeah, I have my own comments, but first I want to respond to member Adamic a little bit. I am conscious that scoring a project is a non-zero amount of time. And the thing that concerns me is just scoring a couple or 3 projects is not going to be enough to give us a sense of how it works, and in fact could prejudice us against. The thing about the scoring criteria is it works in aggregate. And you would need to, I would say, 10% of the projects to see how it works. 2 or 3 is not going to give a good sense, because you could get small nitpicky or weird anomalies. Like there's always outliers. And the thing is, if it works in aggregate, then it works. So, and I don't think scoring 10% of the projects is reasonable ask. So I guess I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure that getting an actual representative sample and understanding the criteria is worth the trade-off.
Yeah, I'm not asking for a representative sample. I'm asking for 2 or 3.
Yeah, I'm
Not
not
useful
comfortable
to
with
you.
2 or 3.
Okay.
I'm only comfortable with a representative sample. I've done enough statistical work to see the danger in just looking at 1 or 2 or 3. In a perfect world, we would have our training data and we would have our implementation and we would model things. But we don't have infinite funds. We don't have infinite time. I'm comfortable just going forward with how I feel is going to be implemented, especially since, as staff has said, we will have time. If we feel certain things didn't get prioritized how we feel, we can adjust at the end. There will be a chance for that. It's not like we're set in stone with whatever the scoring criteria dictates. Anyway, that's my feelings. But I also had a couple of my own comments that I noted down so I wouldn't forget. Here we are. I'm going to say that you have a trail listed on there that doesn't qualify as a trail even under your old 8-foot standards. And that's the one that connects Silverwood to Wright through the Rex Manor Park. It's through the park, a 4-foot sidewalk that has benches on it. And going through the Calvary Chapel, there's a chain. You have to actually get off the path to get around it. Anyway, it's great for walking, but I don't think it's a bike path. Let's see. For the visionary connections, am I allowed to propose some? Is that in scope? Okay. So at the end of Chiquita, there is a trail on the map that looks like it connects to Chiquita, but it does not. There is a fence. I would like a gate in that fence. At the end of Valencia, which is a new row house development, South El Camino, on the border of Los Altos, it backs up against Permanente Creek. And I think that there's a good opportunity to put a little bridge there and connect it to the Los Altos side, because right now the only exit is in Miramonte and it's not in current conditions bike ped friendly connection. Maybe we can fix that, but anyway, I think those are a couple relatively low cost opportunities that I would like to see. And that's all I had.
I guess I drop in. First, I have one request on the maps, and I'll be a broken record. But I think it's very important to put the schools that Mountain View kids go to in Los Altos on the maps, because Los Altos High, Springer, which I think is there because it's fun, but also Black, Egan, Santa Rita, and Almond at the very least, because we're talking about networks, and right now you look at things and pretty much it dead ends on El Camino, but it's not the full route. So we need to show where the kids, we have to cross El Camino every day, wind up and then try to align also, the best possible path there. So I'll be repeating myself every single time I don't see it, but I think it's very important because it's these are destinations for about 2,000 kids in Mountain View. So I mean, that's and these are Mountain View residents who pay taxes and so on. So that's my first things on the pedestrian network things. I think I like the clarification you provided, but the goal is to show the crossings, their conditions, which ones needs improvements, which ones are missing maybe because that's too there. But I want to make sure that this is communicated to CTC and to council, whoever will then approve the things, to make sure that what we are looking at here is not what's going to be used for scoring. And to me, again, I'm much more worried about crossings than a missing piece of sidewalk, to be honest. But that's there are some sections, and I think committee member Adamic mentioned that are critical, with overpass and underpass and so on, that are very much a barrier. But some of them that are missing on the cul-de-sac, who cares? Their kids may, see their ankle, and it's like, well, they didn't want sidewalks, so I'm not too concerned about this. The other thing too, and I think I sent you a picture, if you could share it. For the unimproved streets, I think it's pretty much what people, decided to have. I mean, they want the rural character or something like this, but it bothers me a little bit for Sleeper Avenue because this is an access to a trail and a park. And I think it should be safe. So this is difficult to see. Maybe you can zoom, but this is a treatment that's done in Los Altos, which, as you know, doesn't have sidewalks. So this is on Springer Road, actually, and this connects essentially. On El Monte, sorry. It connects the Y between Springer and El Monte to essentially Almond School. So that kid here is most likely going to Almond School where you access the back end. So because, it would take an act of God to have sidewalks in Los Altos, they came up with that solution where it's not really separated, but it works. So you have a bike lane and a pedestrian path. And I'm wondering if it's something that would be doable on a non-improved street, things like this. I mean, people may lose parking on the streets, but, they chose by not improving their streets. And I think that would be a treatment that would be great for something like Sleeper. Because, from the plan, it looked like, there was potential trail, bike lane, but nothing for sidewalks because, we cannot force a sidewalk on an improved street. So that would be, I think, a decent compromise. That could be possibly a solution also on some of the other passes, to kind of split the lane, if you will, between bikes and pedestrians, maybe with some more dividers and so on. But and I haven't seen it done in any other places, but I think it's when I had looked, it's kind of a treatment that's allowed in rural areas, to have not a sidewalk, but a kind of a path along the streets. And it's used every day by kids going to school. And, my son went to that school. That wasn't there back then, but that's obvious. And then for the scoring criteria, I mean, I'm not going to revisit it because I think we keep spending time on this, but I think it's overly complicated. I looked at the scoring criteria in the Sunnyvale active transportation plan, and it's much simpler. That's like 7 rubric. They split between pedestrian and bikes because, as you can see in your criteria, it's very difficult to score things the same way. A network for bikes is different than a network for pedestrians, so that's a challenge. And they don't have ranges, so that's 0 or 1, things like this. And these are just very, most of them are re-quantifiable. So there is some equity components, there is some injury things, there is distance or proximity to route to school. And I don't know, it seems overly complicated, but people have spent lots of time and provided lots of feedback. I'm not going to do this. And one thing I'd like to mention is that, I feel that there are certain things where some projects will be dinged because something cannot be built. And it's not because, and I don't think it's necessarily right. In particular, there are some negative points, I guess, or some 0 points you get if you cannot provide permeable surface or trees or something like this. And I watched the discussions on DPAC and in council, and it seems to me that these are conditions that it's not possible because there is no space, but it doesn't mean that the project is not worthy. So it's pretty too late to change it, but for something like the permeable streets, I think it should be a goal throughout the city. And that we measure versus the project by project things, because there are streets where we'll be able to do more than 4%, or for instance, and I mean the idea is to do it there. And then finally, I'm not very clear on the process for the policies things, because I believe firmly that we focus a lot here on capital projects or things like this. But there are a lot of improvement that can be made by policies, such as no right on red, such as, clearly marking the areas where cars cannot park near a crossing and so on. I mean, we could put planters there. We could, just do a lot of things, lots of improvements. Even just paint, putting a stop bar with the crossings, that doesn't cost much. And to me, these are things that would be more citywide type of things. And we would do it, in a more ad hoc manner without necessarily having a fully project or things like this. And I'm trying to connect the dots there, but it's I think it's very important to do the capital projects and so on. But I think there is a lot of things that we can fix by policy and with general goals for the city. I mean, we're gonna try to eliminate whites on reds, block by block or neighborhood by neighborhood, but with a goal to do it as much as we can. Same thing for permeable things and so on. And so these are my comments.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Yes, I haven't made any comments yet. Just since we have that picture still up, I'll say, I don't have to remove it, that's fine. Or don't have to leave it up, that's fine. I also like that treatment. I've also seen treatments, I cannot recall on what road, but in Los Altos, presumably for similar reasons, where they basically would just like throw down a small curb as if it's basically a protected bike lane to make that be a sidewalk, so you don't have to really do as much for drainage and the such, which I think is a very reasonable way to put a sidewalk on a road that's not a nice sidewalk, but it's still better than walking the street, especially on something like Sleeper. Anyways, still on unimproved streets. I will express a soft desire to at some point see the city revisit that policy. It has been 32 years since the document that was referenced was written, or rather since it was approved by council. And so
some of us may not be born back then.
Some of us were not born at that point. And on top of that, that was well after those locations had already been annexed by the city. I'm sympathetic to, in fact, suspect I agree with many of the reasons that was written at the time. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be revisited. At the same time, I don't think, for the most part, with the exception probably of Sleeper, most of those streets are probably not things that I'm too stressed about inclusion either way in the active transportation plan. And Sleeper, I think treatments like what was shown and would help substantially. On the topic of the scoring criteria, I am largely sympathetic to Member Stone's comments. I do understand some frustration with not being able to have as great an intuition for what the criteria mean as we might like. At the same time, I think they are reasonable criteria from what I've seen. And there will also be a finite number of projects in this plan regardless. We don't need the criteria to be completely perfect, and they, regardless of what we try to do, they will be completely perfect. Like my intuition on most cul-de-sacs would be, yeah, you probably prioritize that less than through connectors, but also a cul-de-sac that say goes to a large apartment building might actually have more foot traffic than many route streets would. So, and there will be exceptional cases when capturing everything. We could try to do better on the scoring criteria. My feeling at this point is that we won't do better by trying to spend more time going back and forth on the scoring criteria right now. I will ask staff at this point, if, for instance, it turns out to, like the member of the public's comment, let's say every single project we evaluate is more than $10 million. That's not going to be the case. But if it turns out that like thresholds or numbers we include in the scoring criteria just don't make any sense as we're going through and doing them, will it be feasible to adjust the actual thresholds and numbers to make them reasonable? And is that something that staff will be watching out for? if something like all the projects are getting exactly the same score on a certain criterion, so it feels completely pointless.
I don't like hypotheticals,
Yeah.
but hypothetically, if that were to happen, we would have to reevaluate, right? We don't want all of our projects to,
Yeah.
defeats the whole purpose of this plan, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
would
I
have to
don't-
reevaluate, and it would have to come back through the process to decide how we wanted to approach
Yeah,
that.
I'm trying to be careful about like opening a can of worms or saying, oh yeah, we'll include a potential massive feedback cycle at the end of the active transportation plan that includes complete reevaluation of the scoring criteria, because I don't think we want that. But I do want to be explicit about if we do end up in a situation where it's clearly doing the wrong thing, I'm assuming staff will exercise professional judgment and not go ahead with it doing a bad thing.
If we start seeing something, we will say something.
Yeah.
But yes, when the projects are scored, they will go back out to the public. The public will have a chance to comment on if these are what they were thinking. You will get a chance, and that's also when we'll start bringing back the policy.
Yeah.
And CTC and council. So there are several more touch points along the way.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Well, this actually sort of touches on scoring criteria. I think one thing I commented on when it originally came before us, and which I still don't have a good answer for, is that it felt like there was a missing component of how many people are likely to use this. I think it's approximated by a lot of the scoring criteria, so it's fine. If you look at the scoring criteria, things like crash rates will, for better or for worse, be correlated somewhat with the number of people that use a street, whether for biking or for walking. And I do worry, just looking at the map, that there may be less density of projects anticipated in the more populated and traversed sections of the city than I might expect. I don't know to what degree this is the case, but if I look at basically the section from downtown Mountain View and then up through the area around Reinsdorf Park, where the area around Reinsdorf Park is the most highly densely populated part of the city, downtown Mountain View is somewhat densely populated and also has a large amount of traffic due to there being a lot of retail and office space. And as a consequence, I would expect there to be very high density of improvements in those areas. They're probably, looking at the maps objectively, there are a higher density than the rest of the city. And also if I look at things like the collision maps from Division 0 efforts, I think the planned projects do likely include that, but it just seems like there's a lower density of projects than I would expect. That also gets to a point that Member Bonds made, that because we aren't calling out intersections and such here, that may just mean that these maps aren't reflective of the level improvements we'll make in some areas. For instance, in the downtown area, I don't know that most of the improvements would be things like put in a class for bike lane. They might be things related to intersection daylighting, adding speed humps, that sort of thing, which I'm guessing would not actually show up in the same way on this map. But yeah, does that comment make sense? Okay, yeah, and I don't know how much that's a consequence of the scoring criteria, of the maps, of my intuition just being slightly off, but yeah, that's what I'm noticing. And I will just reiterate I don't know that there would have been any good way to visualize it, but I do think because of the importance of intersections and crossings to both bicycle and pedestrian mobility, I would almost consider that a more relevant map in some respects than the especially for the pedestrian map, than just what gaps are closing. Although I understand that the putting together these maps and visualizing things, especially at the stage of the project we're at, was challenging. So
Good eye test.
And I will reiterate that I really look forward to seeing the policy improvements that we're likely to see in the ATP coming forwards, because those are also things I am very excited to see, especially since those are not things that prior bicycle and pedestrian master plans put much effort into. And so I think I've made prior comments on those that I'm not making comments on specific policies really right now. So I'm just excited to see that. And I'm trying to figure out what location.
Oh, I still have comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. So in response to Member Stone, I just want to say I've taught statistics at the master's level. I've managed a team of data scientists at a tech company. I'm well aware of the desirability of having a sufficiently large random sample to evaluate things. However, I've also learned that in absence of that, qualitative data can be very valuable to get insight. And I think this like, ooh, we might be biased, or maybe someone's gonna have a favorite project. I think those are maybe unjustified fears, and I don't quite understand why we want to keep ourselves blind, because I mean, if you look at it, this is pretty much the input that we have for the ATP. It's like the scoring criteria. This is the only thing that we get to say like yes or no to, right? In a way, right? This is like the most impactful thing, and to not have any information on how they will work, I think, I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to say that I find it odd. I've also reviewed grant proposals for the NSF multiple times. I did not find it incredibly time consuming, despite each one of them being like 100 pages each or whatever. I've reviewed the Measure B planning grant applications. That was like 10 to 15 applications. I spent a couple of hours on it. Maybe I should have spent more. I don't think that asking for some number of projects to be scored is an unreasonable task for staff. I don't know why it would take more than a couple of hours, but it seems that the committee doesn't want to ask for that. So I guess I'm the only one. But I just wanted to clarify that I'm not unaware of the benefits of sample data or other things.
Member Bante?
So I had one comment on to kind of answer or piggyback on a comment from Commissioner Kuzmak. So I looked before this meeting at the pedestrian master plan from 2014, like 11 years ago, or something like this. And it did have some policy actions. One of them was to actually revisit the unimproved street policy to see what would be doable. And I guess we're back to this here again. So.
Sorry, one more thing. So this reminded me, I agreed, and I think this is what I had said originally about adding sustainability and biodiversity to scoring criteria. I think my opinion was also that this should be something that's attempted for all projects as far as it's feasible, rather than having it be points. But of course, I don't know without seeing sample projects scored. I noticed that this category had fewer points lowered when the feasibility category was introduced, right? It went from 10 to 9. The others lost like 3 points. Just my input is that I think this is one that could have lost 3 points versus the other ones.
They
Like
went down by
relatively.
10%.
Huh?
They won't down by 10%. I mean, you can make the value statement. I'm not going to disagree with that. But they went down by 10%. That's why they lost the amount they did.
Right, but like when you, anyway, sorry, I just am pointing out that it's like a good candidate to deduct points as opposed to the other categories.
I'll go ahead and add my comments, I guess. Specifically on the maps, the comments about missing schools slightly over the border. And I noticed that the Coles site school didn't appear to be on the map.
The
Oh,
Los
the
Altos
future
project
sites.
to
by Pachetti, California.
So I would like to see that on the map. I also would echo the comment that projects would serve non-residents, through commuters especially, may be very beneficial. So someone commuting from East Palo Alto to Los Altos for a job certainly occupies more space on our streets, whether in a car. So those should be prioritized and equal, or perhaps because of the mileage even more than trips by Mountain View residents who may be making shorter trips, as it were, because they're already in the city. So that my general comment is that I'm not sure that both the cost criteria and the other criteria have the sense of per unit. So we mentioned the El Camino. I guess it's 4.5 miles or whatever through the city, and has a proportionally larger cost, much of it not borne by the city. But that would be a low scoring project. And so same with per benefit. So we talked about the overpass versus the cul-de-sac. The number of residents or travelers using a arterial versus number on a cul-de-sac certainly aren't the same. And yes, it would be reflected in the high injury network in some aspects of perhaps the criteria, but a little concerned that those weren't directly proportioned, as it were, both on the cost and the benefits. I would like to endorse the idea of ranking of all projects, old and new. So we can kind of see where things are falling off, getting taken off the list or falling off because of completion, or falling off the list because of ranking. Tracking, yes. I mean, as part of the ATP, so we should see projects go up and down, both on their scores and any proposed discussion that may come back at a future time because the benefits are increased or the cost is changed. I'd like to see just kind of a very fluid type of ranking of where we've what projects we have in the pipeline or had discussed, and which have completed or which have dropped off because of change in criteria scoring. I definitely understand the concerns. I think having criteria for discussion is better than what I saw when I first started coming to BPAC, which was kind of squeaky wheel got the grease, and certain neighborhoods were much more vocal, or certain constituencies than others. So having some criteria that at least can be discussed and scored, whether imperfect, is still an improvement. I expect that we will get a learning curve on, and yes, we can always voice that we thought the project was underscored because the criteria wasn't reflective enough of desires, which seemed to be apparent, but maybe weren't. So I think it's been good work by the staff. I think we have more work to do when the policy aspects actually come back. But on the network side, and just getting the update on what the ranking got changed to, I appreciate that work. Okay, further comments? I think we were asked to make an endorsement, which I would assume would be desired in the form of a motion.
Yes. Would you like to see the request?
Yes, please.
Before we get to make the motion, while Brandon's setting it up, I just want to capture things that came up that, things that came up. One was, remember Dominic mentioned tracking of projects, or explicitly. I'm not sure that's related to the map or scoring criteria. It does feel related to the ATP. I'm inclined to want to see a tool like that going forwards in the ATP. So we may consider making a recommendation like that, although I think that would just be entirely separate from anything related to the maps and scoring criteria. And there then would be the question, there's the question, are there any, I didn't hear any specific recommendations. Actually, sorry, I heard member Dominic suggest potentially adjusting, asking for an adjustment to the sustainability number to as where we would cut some of the weight from to accommodate feasibility metric. But I didn't hear any other proposed revisions to the scoring criteria themselves. I did hear member Dominic express frustration with the overall approach to scoring criteria. But I'm just trying to catch whether there's any additional motions we want to make beyond simple acceptance of that. Was there anything else on the table that?
I would just like to add, if you want to add that we include the Los Altos schools in
Yeah.
the
Oh, okay.
baseline of the map, that would, I mean, that's an easy, just add to that.
Okay. Yes, that was, usually that sort of thing, we don't always bother with motions on, but you never know.
I just-
mean, I have to repeat it every single meeting, so.
That's
So
fair.
is there a motion to update maps with Los Altos district?
The schools in Los Altos that Mountain View
Yes, sir,
kids
Mountains.
attend, so. And you know what, ours.
Yeah.
I mean, we can make that as a very simple motion.
Yeah.
Like, I move that when staff presents a map with the Mountain View Westman School District schools, they also include the Los Altos School District schools as well.
And Los Altos High, so, which is MVLA, but. so,
Yes.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Was that appropriately clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking that there wasn't some confusion there.
Okay, so we're back to the larger motion.
Yes.
So. One thing I'd like to, because if this is gonna go to the CTC or things like this, I'd like to make sure that it's clear to them, because they are the ones who kind of ask for that map. I mean, to kind of change the process to have the maps and something like this, to make sure that the maps, that will be used for the scoring will be including, the intersections and the crossings, because, I don't know what they had in mind or things like this, but if you have the same reaction as me, just showing the sidewalk is not, it's not what's the most important for pedestrians, so.
Do you think like larger, like
But
piece
well,
size or something?
just to make clear that this is a map of the sidewalks, but what's going to be counted is, really the crossings. And
It doesn't need to be in the
things.
map, but it should be explicitly
Yeah.
stated.
So
It
that's,
will be because of the approval of the scoring criteria as we couldn't do it without knowing that
Sorry, what will be? I just want to make sure.
crossings. Part of the scoring criteria is pedestrian crossing distance. And so we
Yeah.
have to evaluate pedestrian crossing distance because it's part of the scoring criteria, so you help approve it. So we will have to know that factor in order to do it.
So as we are scoring the projects, they will include the crossings. It's just not easy to put all of those crossings on one map for a holistic crossing map. Right, but as
Sure.
we identify the projects that will include crossings in the
so
project.
I thought the criteria was that, for pedestrian was that it would help kind of connect to the pedestrian networks, but or if it would improve it, but it's up, if the pedestrian network shows only the sidewalks, it's not clear to, I mean, at least to me, that crossings would be part of it. I mean,
It's the
We
seems to
request-
assure
be.
you that it will be.
So is the request to show the crossings as part of the holistic network?
Well, I mean, or maybe a narrative or something like this to kind of indicate that this is
Is
a
it
key
just that when
important.
projects are evaluated, intersections will be, and signalization will be included in the pedestrian, or?
So I don't think there's any question of whether or not the intersections will be included when it comes to actual projects. I think it's more of a question of how is this information usefully presented to CTC and the public. I am not sure what the useful, if any, explicit recommendation to make is beyond expressing that we think it's important, and so trying to make that clear as useful, but if someone else can come up with a useful recommendation.
I don't know, I wonder, there might not be enough space, but maybe if you zoom in, there are some intersections close to schools that are striped differently, and there's some intersections that are kind of up to spec in terms of, you know, like the bulb outs and things like that. Maybe that could be a different color, or where that's planned could also be like an empty circle versus just like an unimproved crossing. Like, I wonder if you could just have like improved crossing, unimproved crossing, and planned improvement, just like you have it for the.
It's gonna be a bunch of dots, so that you're gonna be able to tell exactly where that is.
I mean, you can have just like very small dots for unimproved, and then like bold for, you know, this is going to be, you know, Castro and El Camino, you know, like there's like a big improvement coming there.
If we were getting to the level of detail of curb extensions,
Yeah.
that's not for a citywide plan. We can't get to that level. We are looking at crossings so that we fulfill the density networks that we're setting for our goals and the scoring criteria.
But not the quality.
That is a very fine level of detail to do. at a
Maybe
citywide
signal
plan.
and unsignalized, or, you know,
Oh,
rapid
okay, sorry, I
rectangular flashing or something
misunderstood.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just an awkward intersection of, I think. I am inclined to say it is useful to, if we're trying to communicate with, well, I realize these maps for us are somewhat a specific request from council. So it's a. To my point, I say, I'm trying to figure out what use work, I think there is people care about intersections, especially for the pedestrian network, although also for the bicycle network. Because those will have an impact on the overall network in meaningful ways. I don't know that there's.
Staff is hearing your comments and we'll incorporate them in our summary to the CTC.
Okay. Is there a use, is this something we're getting a motion on? Specific breakdown is helpful, or is this, or do you seem like more comments about how to communicate?
I don't feel that it is necessary, but you're asking me for my opinion. It does not mean that's what you have to do.
Can you remind me the scoring criteria for pedestrian in relation to the network? Because I'm fuzzy now. What it said.
I can,
It fills a gap in the existing sidewalk network.
I'll bring it up here if I can get control of my.
Because maybe that's where.
Oh,
it's
too many
used.
escapes.
So-
Right. All right, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay, it's just block Lynn.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Is that on the screen?
Yes.
But that's not the best one.
I mean, I just started thinking that all of them have things that are relevant to pedestrian network.
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah,
Probably improves pedestrian network density is the most relevant one.
yes, thank you. I'm sorry.
And some safety.
There it is,
comfort and
blue, yes. We can't score that unless we do what you're asking for, member Latte.
Yeah, so I mean, so to me, improvement is more than just the density. I mean, they are, you know, as I mentioned, I walked here across 7 streets. There are very different treatments to each of these crossings. Some of them, like El Camino, it's still, it was restriped or things like this, but the stop bars are still very close to the cars. There's still no islands. And it's a very long, things to do. And so to me, it's not just about reducing, having a more dense set of network is to have better quality crossings. So,
I tried to express how I assume this is going to go. We will have we will have designs, we will know how we want to be designing an intersections based partially on policies from the ATP and partially on design standards that exist.
Yes, design standards that exist. That is the answer to this question.
And then when we are going through and asking what intersections are we going to prioritize making modernizing for, we'll go through these lists to score them and we'll say like, okay, is this a high crash intersection? Like we would presumably try to, most intersections along El Camino, we would score very highly on that. And we would say, okay, we care more about modernizing the improvements at that intersection. If it were the type of improvement that, well, reducing pedestrian crossing distance, that would apply to many common types of improvements, although that one's very binary criteria. And we would probably, most things like that would probably get some amount of scoring on other criteria, like if it's a project that is modernizing an intersection near a school, it'll get support school children. And same with transit and key destinations. Oh, right, that's one of the ones that I was
Yeah.
like good with helping to support overall traffic.
So it appears in another place in access and equity.
Yeah, I think that,
It fills an existing sidewalk, a gap in sidewalk network, and this seems to be just about the sidewalk gap, with quite a few points, and I think improving or adding a crossings may have more impact on the quality of a pedestrian network than.
yeah, and we did have,
sidewalk gap.
we did have improvements in there. There were two that are key. One is closing the length. And the other is community.
But you have here specifically, for this, I mean, you can.
So
You can have 6.5 things for this
Is the
versus.
argument that it's more points compared to improving the density, which is only 4 points, and this one is 6.5, and you think that?
Well, I think that's, I think to me, again, it's not just the density, it's also the quality of things like this, of the crossings, but I think improving crossings for pedestrians is more important than closing the
So-
sidewalk gap.
When it
Yeah,
comes to
and
the
it's-
quality, if I could, if it comes to the quality of the crossing, as Member Kuzamal mentioned, and I'll go into more detail, we will use design standards that are industry standards. So if it's a big, busy street like California, there are warrants and metrics that we use to evaluate, should it be a pedestrian hybrid beacon? Should it be a rectangular flashing beacon? Should it just be a marked crosswalk? Should it be an unmarked crosswalk? We would apply industry standards to those locations, and you will get a map that indicates later in the process, because we haven't done this level of analysis yet, that indicates what those crossings are from a qualitative perspective, making assumption that higher quality is pedestrian hybrid beacon and lower quality is no crossing.
Can I ask a question to maybe clarify your concern? So if a project potentially adds a crossing where none existed before, it would get 4 points. But if it just improves a crossing that exists, let's say it's an unmarked crossing and we're putting a pedestrian hybrid beacon, that does not in and of itself add to the scoring of the project. Is that your concern?
Yeah, because, I mean, if you look at it, I think it's more important than
Yeah,
closing a
but I think it's
sidewalk gap.
addressed if you look at community comments. So let's take the Phyllis crossing where there was a fatality. Okay, there was no markings, no crossing, but it was an intersection. It would rank extremely high because it got a significant number of community concerns. It was on the fatal network. It would get done. And so I think the criteria are there, and it was designed with available standards. It did not go for, I believe, decreasing the pedestrian crossing distance, but it ranked very high because of it was earning points on several others, and it may have been even close to 500 feet.
just to clarify, is the request that we make, are you trying to work towards a recommendation that we ask for adjustments to the scoring criteria?
Well, so. But again, I haven't followed the whole things, but my understanding is that we are back here to the scoring criteria because it was to show, to get a holistic map and then to show how the scoring criteria will get you to that holistic map. So that's why I'm zeroing on the criteria that have been adjusted to refer to the network, because I don't think it was the case there. And I think the reference to the network for pedestrians, I think it's much more important to use, the crossings are much more important to the network than the sidewalks. So that's why I'm kind of, because if you look at it, I think these are kind of newish kind of or updated criteria, right? Because they now refer to the network.
We brought these criteria almost a year ago to the BPAC. The only thing different. We made changes that BPAC gave us, which were like safe routes to school and some of the numbers. But then they went to council and the council gave us input, not about any of this, the existing, the words or the points. They gave us input that it didn't have feasibility and implementation. And they told us to go add that. And they didn't say how to scale the other ones to make that happen. So we just did 10% indiscriminate of the others. So they gave us no indication that they had an issue with the wording or the points of the existing of the scoring criteria as presented at that time. That's my understanding based on.
But they didn't know what the network looked like, I guess, so. Or other questions on this?
Right.
Yeah, but I think, you know, any intersection you pick, especially if it's been one that has had discussion because of injuries or fatalities, is going to rank very high. And any sidewalk gap is going to rank, you know, relatively low compared to those. So if you're asking, is sidewalk gap too high? My answer would be no, I don't think so. I think 14 points for it's on a fatal network such as Grant and El Camino or Phyllis or El Monte. You're already at 14 points. Community Commons gives you 9, so you got 23. Some of those also reduce block length, so you pick up 4, you're at 27. It's hard to beat 27 points for any of those significant locations that we've had in front of us in the recent past the 5 years.
And I'm just trying to get us, make sure we're not running in circles. First off, I note that I think that the sidewalk gaps that exist that are not on the unapproved street network are actually relatively important things, since virtually all of them force people to cross streets multiple times to get around. Secondly, can you get this staff recommendation up?
Yes.
Can I move that we recommend to the Council Transportation Committee for staff to proceed with the development of the active transportation plan, including maps and scoring criteria as presented?
That's a motion.
Yes.
I can second that at this time.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion?
You know, I can't in conscience support it, and I think, you know, I would not support it anyway, but I think asking for intersection improvements to be more explicitly scored, even if, you know, staff will always do this up to standard, et cetera. I think when you're looking at a project, if a project does present the opportunity to improve an intersection for pedestrians, that would be good. But anyway.
I have a, do you want to proceed with your motion? Or-
Sorry, could you, whatever you were going to say, could you say that?
What I was going to say is I'm wondering, it seems as though there's some concern about the crossings, and seeing the crossings and also incorporating them into scoring criteria. I'm wondering if it would satisfy you if the sidewalk gap included gaps in the quality of the crossings along the pedestrian network, according to whatever standard we use. Does that work?
I don't think I understand.
So if there's a pedestrian path, this project and it's this pedestrian path, there's a crossing and the crossing is not at the quality that would reflect industry standard, it could we include that as a sidewalk gap?
Can I
It's a network gap.
Network gap.
build on that?
Pedestrian
We
network gap.
click in the network, right?
So my understanding, one of the main reasons sidewalk gaps is in here is because it's an access and equity. It's like an ADA requirement. We had like, if there's a place where there's no sidewalk, I can often get around that, but someone mobility impaired may not be.
That is not an ADA requirement.
Sorry,
No.
it's may not be literally an ADA requirement,
yeah.
but
But it's providing.
Universal access, yeah.
access
It's inconvenient.
to people who are potentially less able-bodied.
Yes,
Okay, sorry, not technically,
we are
yeah,
in line with ADA.
yes, Okay. Yeah, I guess, but I don't know if there's a really easy objective way to apply that same kind of metric to crossings, but did you have something like that in mind?
Well, that's what I'm wondering about.
Like
So,
there are places where for example, the pedestrian island doesn't have ramps.
well, that's a level of detail that a citywide plan can't get to.
Mhm.
We can run this analysis to check. We have the GIS files to run this analysis to know what our existing conditions are. And then we have the design standards to know what the crossings would be. And that is our intention. That analysis is our intention. So if it doesn't meet the qualitative standards of a design standard, so if there's so many cars and there's a warrant for these things. If it doesn't meet the warrant, then the plan would say, we need to go and do the thing to make it meet the warrant, as our RFB is, or pedestrian hybrid beacon is an example. That certain amount of car traffic, we just have white crossing paint. Well, if that car traffic is high, then it would be it would be a pedestrian hybrid beacon. If it is sort of high, it's an RFB. If it's a little quiet local street, then the current white paint meets the standard, and that is the type of analysis that we are going to do. But we can't obviously do that at this, we were never intending to do that at this point.
Yeah, and warrant analysis is.
And to be good, so that analysis,
Yes,
which you're
takes a
planning to
while.
do, will be one of the things that generates a list of projects that will then be scored.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And so if we, right now, those would get some certain scores on the scoring criteria. Which in the case of the specific line item on the scoring criteria related to sidewalk gaps, those projects would not, just related to intersections would not get points on the sidewalk gap, but they would get points on other things depending on where they are, right? And
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. I apologize.
the project, we will get many lists of projects, including
Yes.
ones for intersections and crossings.
Yes,
The ones for intersections and crossings will be scored according to the scoring criteria.
yes.
The scoring criteria as it exists, or as is being presented by staff, would produce values, produce scores for those projects.
Yes.
So.
Where I think that member Bonte is getting to is he wants to ensure
Yeah.
that we don't just cover the gap
Yeah,
by putting some white paint down. He wants the quality of the gap to be covered by a quality facility. And what I'm saying is that we will use national standards and design guidelines to match. If we have a gap, the solution is we pull it out, we apply the numbers, and we present that to you later. And you see what that solution is at that gap.
Sorry, so the scoring criteria will not affect what the project is, it just affects what.
Need
It might
assessment.
affect, have some slight effect on the rankings of the projects, or if it were a major change to the scoring criteria, a major effect on the rankings of the projects.
Yes.
Okay, but what about this proposal to treat an substandard crossing facility as a gap? That seemed very concrete. So
So-
not just
so
the
that-
sidewalk gap, but a
so
crossing gap.
maybe, shall I say a suggested
Yeah.
motion, which I'm trying to kind of piece together all the pieces. BPAC members indicated they care about intersections and crossings and would like the crossing map to be presented as part of the holistic network, and that the scoring of projects incorporate crossings, and we can kind of figure out.
I like the suggestions you made to kind of mention that, but to help in the pedestrian network, it's, gaps of sidewalks is important, but, improving or having quality.
Member Stone.
I just want to state that we do not have time to do a whole new holistic map for crossings and still hit our CTC and the council shutdown, and you want us to have this all done. So I'm just
What
realize
about for scoring? Is there enough time for when the scoring happens to incorporate?
That's what I'm saying is going to happen.
it's already going to happen. You will get
Yes.
it. It's just not gonna get it between now and going to CTC, right? So if you make that recommendation to include that, then we have to get that done before going to CTC.
Go to CTC later in that.
So
Yeah.
it's back to, maybe, recommend some narrative to explain this, but this is, what you'll see is just the sidewalk map essentially, but, you will take into account,
Signalization will be included in the
crossings or
project,
it's,
in the project.
and that improving this kind of links, if you will, in the network is just as important as a sidewalk gap, so.
For all the projects, the scoring criteria identify where we need to go do work. What the work is comes later and can if it's simple, like our RFB or pedestrian neighborhood beacon, it can come at a citywide level. If it's like curb extensions in a project, that's a great tool, but that's not something we can do at this level. So what you're looking for, as I understand it, is you want a quality solution. That's going to happen, but it's not part of the scoring criteria.
So let's look at the example also of a cul-de-sac that may not have a sidewalk gap, so that would score something based on that criteria, but something that improves a crossing on El Camino, that again, lots of kids do this, would not be scored as part of a network, pedestrian network, right? So in that rubric, right? So
It would be.
Scored.
Be scored.
It wouldn't get the sidewalk gaps score.
It would
because
not get sidewalk gap points, but it would get points in other categories. It would still be a project that is evaluated.
So what about adding it like sidewalk or crossing facility quality gap? Like I'd like to. Ria's proposal.
I was gonna suggest something a little more concrete, which would be unmarked crossings across a major street. For example, Palo Alto crossing California, that's 4 lanes. It's an unmarked crossing right now. If we could treat those as a sidewalk gap.
Like, is a crossing gap, so add crossing gaps to sidewalk gaps analysis.
Is it that my understanding that occurs with the 500-foot net pedestrian density?
There is already a crossing there, right? So it wouldn't necessarily score on it.
Just unpainted.
It's an unmarked crossing, right?
So I do now, I understand what you're saying is even crossings that exist,
If it's an unmarked
if they don't meet
crossing,
the standard of the nation, then they score as if they are not a crossing.
As a sidewalk gap.
it's a pedestrian gap in the same way that a sidewalk gap is a pedestrian gap. Does that get at what you're saying?
yeah, I think I would extend it to more than just unmarked things, but it's
But that's
it's
right.
better.
Crossing
But-
quality gap.
I mean,
Is,
that's very,
okay,
most of our crossings could be improved. I don't know where that line is.
yeah, so I think the line is you add it probably to the same line item that says partially close a sidewalk gap, and you say improves a partially closes the sidewalk gap or improves a crossing that does not meet current pedestrian crossing standards.
Okay.
I
we
think
understand.
does that sound like a reasonable?
I worry that's gonna get us into the situation where
Everything meets it.
that criteria.
Which is my main concern with that.
Mhm.
I think it's a risk with a bike network too, because to be honest, but it's
The fills a gap in the orange.
this is beyond, the thing there.
Yeah, that's a. Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge of trying to choose criteria.
I guess,
But I guess the ones that are on a safe route to schools, which will include schools in Los Altos.
yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
most of this stuff's
already.
already covered by other criteria.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying I'm mostly comfortable with the motion, which is still
On the floor.
on the floor. I would be comfortable adding a little bit something, but very specifically major streets and unmarked.
As a separate motion or?
It would need to be the same, part of the same one, because we can't say we recommend the scoring criteria as
Yes, it would
presented
need
and
to
then do
be-
another motion of, so.
But I don't think I'm comfortable.
Doing it overly blanket, just any intersection that's below standards, just because you think that would just kind of hit every
I really
project.
feel like, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know the standards also, so that also makes it hard for me to judge. I don't have enough information to say that. I know that there's not that many, like, if we say it's an unmarked crossing across at least 4 lanes of traffic, there's not that many in the city. And I think that those should definitely be treated as a big gap and score well.
It's the concern that the projects that are specific to intersections will not be high enough on the ranking at the end of the day. Is that the concern? Or is it that city staff will not evaluate betterment of the crossings?
So I don't know, it's to
Because
me
if
that
it's
we-
that it won't be a project, once the projects are ranked, you can come back and say, we think that this should be more of a priority based on what we've heard from residents or experience or whatever, and we can change that. So if that's the concern, if the concern is that staff's not gonna look at the intersections as part of the projects, we will, and we will make sure that we follow all regulations and codes as applicable to the time. So I'm trying to figure out
I
what's
think
the.
well, for me, my understanding is throughout this has been that, yes, I'm not concerned about the projects, including the standards. It's just a question of whether it is reasonable in terms of prioritization. And my inclination is, yeah, along the lines of, I think the criteria will serve reasonably as is, but I would be willing to try to include something to bump up the intersection gaps. But I don't know how to phrase that usefully, and so I don't know if, to the point about, we'll end up with a list, and that list is not written in triplicate. So.
I would say that your concern about standard crossings exists for all other things, right? There's parts of the sidewalk that are narrow to like 2 feet, right? And those are not going to be scored as a sidewalk gap either.
But
It's like simplicity versus.
yeah, but I mean, even if a sidewalk is like 2 feet or things like this, I don't feel unsafe. Pretty much it's way more stressful when you're in a crossing to start with, and that's much more of a barrier than the narrow sidewalks in my experience.
But I mean, I guess there's stuff in there to address that, like closing the crossing distance is scored
Yeah,
pretty high.
and there's things like, I mean, for me personally, a 2-foot sidewalk gap's not typical, but sidewalk is not an issue. That's not true for someone with a stroller.
I'm not disputing that this is not an issue. This is, you know, when you look at where the accidents happen, that's quite often at a crossing, because that's when you mix it up with cars. So it's a, you know.
I guess I would also just say, like, if we had some sample projects, maybe all of this would be clearer, but we don't, and we never will. But I think, like, for me, the concern is that there was direction, I guess, from council that they wanted like a holistic pedestrian network. We know that intersections are like just as important, if not more important than sidewalks. And that might not be reflected in the scoring criteria. We had a proposal that would amend the scoring criteria to to incorporate intersections in gaps. I thought that was a okay proposal. But so for me, the disconnect is between like the holistic network and then the scoring criteria, which don't incorporate intersections as gaps in the network. Yep.
Okay, I wanted to get us to something actually useful.
We have a motion that exists. Is anyone suggesting an amendment to the motion on the floor?
So I like to amend it, but you know, I'm not comfortable with the maps as presented because, you know, for pedestrian, because they don't show intersections. So I understand it may be complicated to do this, but I want to at least have some in the presentations to show that, you know, due to constraints or what's not, you know, we're showing only the sidewalks, but you will take into account intersection, and this is a key part of a network. I mean, that's, I worked in software engineering for a while. I mean, the network is really,
Is the
connectors,
desire-
it's always where weak link.
Is
So-
the desire primarily just to ensure that intersection gaps are presented as a document and map at a point?
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at this, I mean, if you focus only on the sidewalk gaps, right? I mean,
So-
it's
so-
a
so
very
sorry,
complete
the
network,
goal
right?
is-
95% of the streets have sidewalks
Yeah,
and
so
down.
your sole desire here is get that information onto a map that we can see at some point. Well, not your sole desire, I realize there's other desires, but is that the, is that what you were asking?
Well, yeah, and I want to make sure that CTC and council or whoever reviews this, has this in mind, that what we're seeing is just.
Are you asking for that to be reviewed before they approve the, this item when it comes before them? Or just before the ATP itself is approved?
I mean, you can present the same maps, but I'd like some narrative, to explain that this is not,
I think we got the
this is not
feedback
a holistic view
earlier
of a
that they,
pedestrian network, so.
my impression is we got the feedback earlier that staff was hearing the comments about intersections and would discuss that at CTC, even if it's not feasible to put together a map before the presumably next CTC meeting where this will be presented. Because we want to get this presented at the next CTC meeting so that ATP can move ahead and we can get to all the other parts of the ATP.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, are you comfortable with staff's discussion at CTC, or do you want to make a motion for something specific?
And we will have a map in this whole ATP process of intersections from a pedestrian perspective. That it will happen.
I am not hearing the suggestion I made about potentially including intersections explicitly in the scoring criteria itself did not strike me as obviously an improvement on the scoring criteria, especially given Member Stone's comments, and I don't see a strong reason to revise it unless someone else has a compelling recommendation. So honestly, my inclination is just go ahead with the motion as is, but if someone can come up with a compelling amendment, great. Otherwise, I kind of want to make a vote, and if there's any other motions we need to do, go ahead with that.
Well, I like the suggestions to mention, intersection gaps, and we can leave it at that, and.
Would a mention of intersection gaps broadly be useful to then be made more concrete by staff, or does it need to be something concrete enough that it is a specific thing?
So what about recommend to CTC for staff to proceed with the development of the ATP, including maps and scoring criteria as presented with additional information and information and emphasis on intersections and crossings?
Sorry, additional information on crossings and
An intersection and an emphasis on intersections and crossings.
is that implying that there would be an additional emphasis in the scoring criteria itself, or just in the verbal update?
So the way I see this is that, the CTC and City Council asked to see the holistic network map before this. I want to make sure that what they see there is just the sidewalks.
Can we change?
But the intersection is a key element of it, holistic network.
Can we change emphasis to discussion? I just don't want to.
Okay, discussion.
I at this time, I'm not hearing us ask for a change to the scoring criteria in particular, so I don't want to have ambiguity.
Yep.
Okay. Is there?
Yeah, I'd like, to suggest the phrasing that Ria had suggested, and it's just, instead of calling it a sidewalk gap, let's call it a pedestrian network gap.
Can we-
I'm not comfortable with saying emphasis because reading it, fully says we are emphasizing that you develop the plan with emphasis, with a specific emphasis to this one thing, which is.
Well, I took the word emphasis
Well,
out.
that's just,
So as presented with additional information and discussion on intersections and crossings.
yeah, at this point, I'm not inclined to propose this. If someone can come up with in the next minute, come up with a good recommendation of a specific request on changing the scoring criteria or specific, if we want to just ask, I guess I would ask staff. Would asking for staff to look at adding a clause about crossing gaps to that particular scoring criteria be reasonable? Or is that overly vague and just going to trigger a whole bunch of rounds of discussion that delay the project?
I would say that we will already be reporting to CTC that the BPAC had concerns with how intersections were scored, and we can express that, but I don't know that you need to make a motion about it. Because one of the things we will do at CTC is tell them about this discussion,
Yeah.
right? We will tell them the comments we heard, which is that intersection crossings is one of the pain points, and that there was a concern of how those would be addressed in the scoring criteria. And there was discussion, but not necessarily a unanimous decision on how to address that. So if they have a new recommendation. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that it needs to necessarily be in the recommendation because those comments will be
Yeah, the
communicated.
only challenge with that sort of thing is then it's not clear on how cohesive VPAC's recommendations were, but I think the information and discussion is fine because I'm not hearing a consensus on VPAC on what exactly we would want to do anyways. So then the motion would be recommend to Council Transportation Committee for staff to proceed with the development of the ATP, including maps and scoring criteria as presented with information and discussion on
Intersections and crossings.
intersections and crossings. Okay, is it possible for us to take a vote on that motion?
Your
Second.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Okay, so there's a motion by
Yeah.
James.
Yeah,
Oh,
It's an
it's a motion by James Kuzma.
yes,
alternative motion.
yes, I'm substituting the prior motion. Since we're still in that phase.
Looking for a second.
Yes.
Second I had, so I don't know.
Second by Bonte.
No, I'm not second.
Oh, I'm sorry, not second.
I was more comfortable with the original motion.
I'm going to go back to the original motion at some level since the discussion is going to be mentioned at CTC.
I feel like there's a lot of nuance here that isn't very difficult to capture in a single motion. And I'm comfortable with staff presenting the discussion as it happened and going back to the original motion. If that's.
Well, I'm not hearing any second for this motion, so
So the motion by,
the alternative motion isn't going for us, so we're still on the original motion.
Yes.
the alternative motion is dropped without a second.
Okay.
I see it. So we're back to the original motion, which is
Exactly the
as
staff
worded.
recommendation, which I moved and Chair Barton seconded, I believe.
Correct.
Okay. Can we vote on that one?
So are we ready to vote?
I'm ready to vote.
Yes.
Okay, so all in favor,
Aye.
all opposed?
Okay. Anything else we want to do on this item? I feel.
Yes.
Oh, there was talking about tracking of projects. Is that something that's
This
useful
will
to
be part of the ATP draft report on how we will
part of the ATV draft report will include how we will track our progress on the
So that will be
ATV.
discussed today.
Okay, so that will be discussed then. Okay,
Okay.
great.
Does that conclude discussion of item 6, I think it was? Okay, having concluded discussion of item 6.1, the active transportation plan scoring criteria and holistic network maps. Moving to item 6.2, BPAC fiscal year 24-25 work plan.
And I will bring that up.
Is that? Sure. Do you want me to talk about it? Do you have it on? Okay. Okay, so let me see. I have it on here, maybe I don't. Yeah, I have it on my system. Okay, so or maybe it's easier to see it up here. Just a few updates since last time going through. We're kind of getting 3/4 of the way through the year, so we've done a lot of things. We've considered the active transportation plan today. I also added the Santa Clara active transportation plan as part of this item B, which we looked at last August. The pavement management we looked at in February, page 2.
Oh, scroll.
We've added in the VTA's 101 Ringstorff project as one of the items under F, and Moffat Complete Streets, which we considered last time. And we had the joint meeting with Palo Alto back in August, and this was the collision. I always get thrown by eye. It's the collision analysis in January. And then, of course, today also discussing the next stage of the ATP. And then over to the TAL, there are a couple of changes on the TAL as well. Tentative agenda list. So today we brought Safe Routes to School final report. We moved the draft work plan to the 2nd of April. So it will come at the same time as the council strategic work plan and CIP. And a few things got bumped.
Okay, clarifying questions from committee members.
Right. There was a lot of things got bumped.
Hmm.
Was it just one reason or it's just a bunch of stuff?
There's an internal review process that happens, and sometimes things come to that, and we find out that they're not ready for the next steps. So that's, yeah.
You, additional clarifying questions? Seeing none, I guess moving to public comment. Public comment in the room. Public comment on Zoom.
No.
And moving to committee comments.
So I look forward to seeing the draft work plan and council strategic priorities item. Last time I recall having, we've seen it sort of before, but not in this form. I think the strategic priorities, at least, I think that some process changed this year, so.
And I guess the projects that were bumped, primarily being not ready. I guess question and comment, I assume or hope most of those are coming back at some point.
Yes.
Yes. Additional comments?
So for the council priority, I mean, I kind of, the things we get to vote on, I guess, or commit on. Will there be kind of some more finer description of what it is? Because I looked at some of them and they seem to be very, one sentence things, and it could mean different things to many different people also.
Sorry, are you talking about the work plan?
Yeah, the work plan.
Okay.
Well, the council priorities work plan items.
I'm not really sure. Have you read that one? That's coming from the city manager's office. So.
Okay, so that's more.
I think the city's figuring out how it works as well.
That felt pretty vague last year.
And then I think it was just announced yesterday or today is that Waymo will start to operate taxis in Mountain View, Los Altos, Palo Alto, and a little chunk of Sunnyvale. And I'm wondering where they're going to park. I don't know.
Not relevant.
Okay, yes, I would agree. Any other comments on, committee comments on the work plan? Okay, seeing none, no motion expected or requested. Going on to item 7, committee staff announcements, updates and requests. Any updates from staff?
So the project updates are El Camino, they got the money for the bike lanes and they're being painted. And I can put that in, there we are. And then also California, they started construction today, so there was some dig outs happening along California, which means that they were replacing chunks of the pavement where they were alligator cracks, where they had to get a bit deeper, and then they'll do the slurry seal after that, and then the rest of it after that. So that's on the next slide. So there we are with the steamroller. And then you were going to do an update on asking fees.
Absolutely. So we're getting a little caught up. If
Last time I didn't have the details, so he's bringing some more details.
we have 4 more months of ask and fees processed. No real outstanding trends in the data. It's all fairly normal. For notable ask and fees in April to May, there were several ask and fees reporting cars parking in the bike lane along the western portion of Middlefield, the time bike lane. And then the same similar multiple ask and fees reporting the same issue around 555 East Evelyn. Transportation and traffic engineering are aware of these issues and discussing solutions. Request for red light cameras, construction of many construction signs put in the pedestrian area. Several complaints of cars being parked on the sidewalk, and 3 near misses where cars were not yielding to pedestrians. May to June, cars parking in the bike lane 555 Evelyn and on Middlefield time bike lane. Several requests for bike lanes on Del Medio. So when we get a request for something like that for Lake Del Medio, that goes into the ATP ask and fee section that you remember me speaking about in the previous presentation. Request for e-bike rebate program to also include pedal bikes. Red curb requests around crosswalks. One person referencing the new daylighting laws. Again, cars parked on the sidewalk. June to July, cars parked in the bike lane 555 Evelyn and also Middlefield. And now in July, we had the same request, the same complaints, I suppose, of cars parking in the bike lane on San Antonio. That lines up with a change in the business of San Antonio. Request for speed bumps, neighborhood traffic management plan, and to get a petition to support that. July to August, final month, request for bike lane on 2600 California. This is between San Antonio and Del Medio. One of the advantages of reporting so far in the past is I can say we have a solution for this particular one. We have a work order put in and approved, reviewed, and everything to add a bike lane in that block once the weather is dry enough. So a couple month, it's hard to say.
And that's only on the east, north side?
Both sides.
Okay, that one existed already.
Are you talking about west of San Antonio? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
So what it is it's a line in parking, and it's a really wide parking area. So an additional line will be added to denote without loss of parking, to denote the bicycle, and then the part bicycle marking, so bike lane, says bike lane. A person tripped on a broken sidewalk and broke their wrist, and then a request for audible pedestrian signs. And those are our notable ask and fees at the end of my report.
Question, is there a definition of the grinding height? Is it a 1/2 inch or 3/4 before they?
I think it's a 1/4 inch, but please don't quote me.
Okay, committee clarifying question.
Yes, does the Del Medio bike lane also get green paint?
Well, Del Medio was not the bike lane that, the 2600 block of California Street.
Oh, it's California.
between-
Does,
and no,
okay, sorry, does that get?
No, because the
No.
green paint process requires the use of thermoplastic, which is a specific kind of dangerous process for which the city uses consultants to do. So when we do any thermoplastic work, we batch it all together to get a good rate. Our streets crew is not able to, they don't have the equipment or the expertise that they could learn, but they don't have the equipment and it's expensive and slightly dangerous. So we do not do thermoplastic.
But might it be batched in the future or will it always?
Yes, it might be batched.
Okay.
Additional clarifying questions? The public comments?
Oh, no.
Committee comments? Alderman Stone?
I actually rode California today. I didn't know it was happening. I was gonna ask you about that, so thanks for letting me know. But I wanna say, because the cars were all gone and we moved parking, you had 10 feet. It was such a different experience biking with so much buffer between the traffic.
I think you had 13 feet.
Except where the equipment was, and I had to go in.
Okay.
But for most of the, it was nice, and I was going at rush hour, so. Yeah, looking forward to that.
Additional comment? Dominic?
Yeah, I think the construction actually started yesterday. I was driving and then I was like, oh, it started. Oh, I should have, no, I'm gonna drive through there just to admire it. So, yeah, that was exciting. I wonder about the Ask Mountain Views. Would it make sense to maybe like just abandon some section and like get current ones? It just seems a little sad that we're getting stuff from many months ago as opposed to current.
We're catching up 4 months at a time as long as Brandon has the time to look at it. We'll see if that holds.
I don't know, like, I guess it depends on what the purpose of these things are. I mean, I guess some problems stick around and there is the thing that if it's been resolved in the meantime, but I feel like part of it would be that we kind of know if things are happening so that we can give better feedback.
So this particular grouping of data didn't show a pattern, but historically, if we want to see patterns, especially annualized patterns, then we would need the months in between, which I don't know how many there are, 5 or 6, in order to make good on our investment of tracking historical patterns.
Then, I mean, I know it's like the ATP and so on, but it would be nice if we're caught up.
Yeah.
So, 4 months at a time, the last 2 meetings now.
Additional comments on the staff report? Closing then item 7.1, I guess we are at 7.2. Any other committee comments?
This is where you would ask about.
Yeah, so I apologize to bring it up there, but as I said, Waymo started their service, and I'm wondering if we knew where they're parking, because I know that's kind of an issue in San Francisco, because San Francisco, interestingly, now there is a big demand for parking space for Waymo.
So
And they also have had incidents where they start to beep at each other for no reason. But just because, I suspect it would increase traffic, wherever they could charge or things like this. And I don't know if we knew that, because it's.
don't know if they have to ask us.
I'm not aware of
Oh,
it. Yeah, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, they have
We
the
can ask
facilities still at
Mayfield.
Mayfield, which is Waymo facility, so.
There's a combination of the AV shuttle item on the council strategic priorities and the fact that we're discussing the work plan at that same meeting. If there's anything specific we want to do there or discuss there about, if there's anything concrete we want to spend time on as a body, I think that might be worth discussing there. I'm not sure there's much to discuss unless your query is purely
This is
informational.
purely a comment, so
Okay.
that's like, you know,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, some extent, I would guess it's just like Uber, we don't can't regulate it. They park at whatever coffee shop they wish.
But I think for Waymo, they all go,
At night, they tend
you
to
know,
go to
to
stores.
their own
Yeah.
days, I guess.
Yeah, you do have a facility on Mayfield where they used to park them.
I also hope they don't park in the streets, you know, because it's
We can't stop them.
uh.
Okay, additional committee comments?
I guess I just feel a bit bad about, yeah, all the, anyway, I apologize.
Not required.
I don't understand why you're apologizing.
It's like, it's hard work, and so I wish I could have been more supportive. Yeah,
You appreciate them.
I appreciate your work, yes.
Thank you. Okay. Any other committee comments?
Second the appreciation.
I felt the appreciation.
We have to discuss unagendized items.
We can always have appreciation on the
Yeah, for
next.
public
agenda.
When is that?
Okay, I think we're concluding committee comments.
That's just
Okay.
public comment on committee comments.
So, date and time for next meeting. Currently, slightly off cycle, scheduled for Wednesday, April 2nd, 30 p.m. Okay, follow-on meeting, regular cycle meeting in June, on June 25th, Wednesday, August 27th, and currently Wednesday, September 24th. Okay. No other items on the agenda. I move for adjournment.
Don't think we-
I think it just
happens.
Everybody's jumping up, so we're.
Oh.